World War II, the period between 1937 and 1945, when, seemingly, the entire planet was at war. With modernized modes of killing on a massive scale, during and after the First World War, now available, by World War II, the concept of warfare becomes an entirely modern and more destructive two-pronged machine. So historians typically divide the planet into two sections during this time, in order to better picture what specifically happened and where. Europe, for instance, saw fighting in what is known as the European theater, while the fighting on the Pacific side of the planet is typically referred to as the Pacific Theater. Here today, we're going to look at the Pacific Theater of the war in order to gain a quality understanding of the fighting that happened there. So December 7th, 1941, the day America is attacked by Japan at Pearl Harbor, is the event that history officially marks as the start of the war. However, Japan didn't just wake up one day and wish to declare war on America. So let's rewind back to 1937 for just a minute. Throughout the early 20th century, Japan modernizes into a formidable trade and militarily strong empire. However, lacking key resources to have a successful empire, like oil, metal, and access to other natural resources, they begin invading the surrounding islands in 1937, as well as Manchuria and French territories such as Burma. After the Manchurian invasion, Japan and China become engaged in a brutal war. America, seeing the Japanese aggression, as well as their numerous war crimes committed, such as the Nanking massacre, placed an oil embargo upon Japan. After all, since America's own oil production in the Philippines, Japan was their number one customer. As a result, Japan turns to the island nations they took over to beef up their trade routes. Desperate for oil, though, they decide to go for oil production centers like the Philippines. The only problem with that is, the Philippines are protector of America, while the other island nations are partners with the Dutch and other nations such as French Burma and British Australia. So in 1941, FDR signs into law the Lend-Lease Act, initially intended for the European nations at war with England. The law allows for the U.S. to not trade with certain countries at war with their allies, particularly Germany and Italy. Seeing that Japan became allies with Germany after the oil embargo, however, they extend the act to include them. With a brutal war between China and Japan raging, not to mention potential Russian partnerships with China threatening Japanese success, Japan, knowing that the American Navy parked at Pearl Harbor severely threatened their power hold on Pacific trade, decides to attack them in December in hopes it would keep them out of the Pacific. So as America prepares for war with Japan, it immediately discovers a major issue with the whole idea. You see, geographically speaking, the Pacific is covered in island chains, now held by Japanese forces, although they do have allies with Australia and China. Since Japan attacked and captured the Philippines subsequent with the attacks at Pearl Harbor, those two are now separated in the midst of Japanese territories. So America needs a battle plan to strategically gain access to Australia and then recapture the Philippines, thus getting together with China and forming the Allied front against Japan. So America decides to adopt the strategy of island hopping. Basically, the theory is, if I need to free Australia first, why should I take every island on the way when only a few will do? So the first major campaign of the island hopping strategy was on the remote Alaskan islands of the Aleutian Atoll. At the time, America controlled the islands, and control of the islands meant control of the entire northern Pacific trade routes. Although there were several engagements of the campaign, the most notorious were the battles of Attu and Kiska. The islands held strategic importance as it was the site of a U.S. naval base, beginning in June of 1942 and lasting until August of 1943. It is the first of major engagements between the United States and the Empire of Japan. Although the heaviest of combat was seen on the islands of Attu and Kiska, the official casualty count of the campaign was 1,481 American dead and 3 warships lost, while the Japanese lost 4,350 and 7 warships and 9 transportation ships. Although this campaign doesn't receive as much recognition as others, it dealt a significant blow to the Japanese as they quickly realized America wasn't going to be easy. The next major campaign began in August of 1942 in the Solomon Islands, the largest island being Guadalcanal. Guadalcanal was a major Japanese base with deep water access and airfields. This island was the Mecca Center, a Japanese control of most of the shipping lanes of the Southern Pacific. With it, America could control the air in that sector of the Pacific, as well as open up access to Australia and a strong naval base. The battle lasted from August of 1942 through February of 1943. The United States suffered 7,100 casualties during the campaign, and the Japanese took 19,000 killed. During this battle, we see the Japanese begin to use banzai, or suicide attacks. There are countless documentaries, books, and papers discussing the battle, so we won't go into depth here. But with the island, America now has access to Australia, as well as an air base to control air coverage for the whole sector of the South Pacific. The next major campaigns of the Pacific Theater occurred on the island chains of the Marshall and Gilbert Islands. Beginning in November of 1943 and lasting until February of 1944, these campaigns were vital due to them being major Japanese bases, complete with naval stations and airfields. With control of the islands of the Solomons, Gilbert, and now Marshall Islands, America can now control all of the waters of the South Pacific, and Japan is now effectively backed into a corner. The battles here include key islands such as Tarawa, Peleliu, Palau, Saipan, New Britain, Kwajalein, and the Eniwatok atolls, as well as others that are just as memorable. Casualties for these campaigns are 611 Americans killed and 2,341 wounded. Japanese casualties are estimated to be 11,000 dead. With these islands secure, America, along with Britain and French aid, were able to secure Australia and the majority of the South Pacific. Once the South Pacific is secure, the Allied forces are able to see the light at the end of the tunnel. They now set their sights on liberating the Philippines and getting to mainland Japan. With their naval superiority, they can now set their sights on the only key islands. These islands include Iwo Jima, Okinawa, the Philippines, and several others. One interesting part about the fighting that we haven't mentioned is that up until now, the forces fighting America in these campaigns were nearly a 70-30 split between Japanese and native islanders. Native troops often surrendered and wouldn't fight as aggressive as their Japanese overlords. Fighting on the home islands, such as Okinawa and Iwo Jima, however, were done by all Japanese forces who would fight to the death. American casualties were 19,520. Dead and Japanese deaths were 130,000. With Japan cornered, a plan to invade Japan is now underway. So the plan to invade Japan was codenamed Operation Downfall. According to American and Allied leaders, the invasion would take 7 million men to capture Japan. Logistically, an invasion would be nearly impossible. With 2 million American servicemen set to get out of service in June of 1945, it was estimated that a draft of over 5 million men would be needed for the invasion. Add on top of this, American production would beef up planes and such, but British and American production would convert to supplying cotton-based products like uniforms and tents that would cause a negative drop in the economy as it shifts to a nearly 15% drop, possibly even higher. To put that into perspective, the Great Depression was caused by a negative drop in the economy by about 25%. So, we're talking about almost another Great Depression happening. Another logistical nightmare for America was the expected casualty numbers for the invasion. Generals estimated nearly 2 million casualties due to the invasion. In preparation, Congress ordered 6 million Purple Hearts to be made. Up until 2015, every Purple Heart issued to soldiers were all originally made in 1945, expected to be issued due to the Japanese invasion. So weighing all the potential logistics and estimated deaths, knowing they have air and naval superiority, America begins to blockade Japan. straining resources while attempting negotiations for surrender. Emperor Hirohito, Japan's supreme authority, refused surrender and encouraged every Japanese citizen, whether women, children, or elderly, to take up arms in defense of the land.